Hello my fellow crafters, this is Leslie Klein, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and owner of the Facebook group Paper Ink Love, here today with a new card tutorial. So I'm just going to adjust my camera here. Today I'm going to show you guys how to do a card with a blending technique using the Stellar Birthday stamp set. So we're going to get started. So for supplies, you're going to need a 6.5 by 8 inch piece of white paper scored at the 4-inch mark. This will be your card base. We also need a 4 by 4 piece of crushed curry. This is what I used for the little celestial body down here. I used the largest circle in the layering circles dies and cut it. This is the remaining half from the initial card, so I'm not going to recut that. I'm just going to use that piece. You'll also need roughly 4 inches by 7 inches of basic white paper for your stamping. I have pre-stamped mine just because it took a lot of time to color, so I figured to save time on the video I'd color it ahead of time. And then you're also going to need a scrap, you could use a scrap of black paper. I used this to do my sentiment, and then I cut it out with the messages die, but I only needed the one piece, and so I just put it in where I needed it, and I was able to use a really small piece of black for that. And then you're also going to need a scrap piece of paper. See, mine's nice and messy. To put your card base on while we blend. So let's get started. For the blending, the colors that I used in order from top to bottom of the card are Misty Moonlight, Pacific Point, Night of Navy, Gorgeous Grape, Rich Razzleberry, Melon Mambo, Calypso Coral, Pale Papaya, Mango Melody, and Daffodil Delight. And these will all be posted in the video description as well. So to get started, I started with the Misty Moonlight, and I didn't want too much of it. I just wanted enough in the top corners. So I just used a small blending brush, and I just rubbed on my ink pad, and I just kind of came up in the corners, and I kind of rounded because we have the celestial body on the bottom. I'm not sure if it's a moon or a planet. I haven't decided yet, which is why we're just using the word celestial body. So I just kind of rounded this at the corners so we could kind of round it down towards that layering circle that we have cut out or will cut out of crushed curry. And then just for the sake of blending, I just kind of rubbed a little lightly at the top. You can make this as dark or as light as you want. Bear in mind that it's easier to add color than it is to blend color out. So start light and build. You can always go back and add more pigment later. So after we finish with our Misty Moonlight, we're going to move on to our Pacific Point. If you feel the need to clean your blending brush in between colors, I really don't feel like you have to if you're staying in the same color family. So blue to blue, I wouldn't feel a need to clean it unless you're going from dark to a light so you don't mix them. But I just cleaned mine in my Stampin' scrub. So I just pre-sprayed it down, and I just kind of rub my brush in there. And then if you like do that, see, it's clean. So it's super quick and easy, and you don't gotta rinse, and then you don't have to use a different brush for every color. So moving on to our Pacific Point. This section I did just a little larger because I went and added stars, and I knew I was going to be doing that. I figured my white splatters were going to show up better on dark colors, so I tried to do larger swatches of dark than of the light colors so that we would really be able to see the stars, because what space without stars, honestly. And then if you look at this compared to this, the colors aren't quite as rich. I laid my color down and then I went back and blended more with sponge daubers after. So we are going to be doing that. So this doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. We're just trying to lay our color down and get a good feel for the background of the card and spacing, I think. Spacing, because it's space. Ah! That was funny. I'm going to pretend you all laughed at home. Next, we're going with our Night of Navy. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We're just laying that color down. I do try to bring it up a little into the previous color. You don't want a hard transition line, I guess would be the word. So working on the Night of Navy now, make sure you're bringing that blend up into that Pacific point. And when you were doing that Pacific point, I should have told you to make sure you're bringing that blend all the way up into the Misty Moonlight. Add just a little more of that Night of Navy. And again, we can always go back and blend and add more pigment later, so. Moving on to Gorgeous Grape. Ooh, that ink pad squeaked. This one I know I want dark just because it's right up against that darker color, so I am going to go back to my ink pad more often than I did on the previous colors to make sure that I'm getting a rich color there. And then again, we want to make sure we're bringing that up into the Night of Navy. This was my first time using blending brushes, to be straightforward with you guys. So I don't know if there's better techniques out there than this. If you guys have techniques or tips or tricks that you'd like to share with the class, feel free to leave them in the comments. Next is the Rich Razzleberry. I love this color. I think Stampin' Up! Honestly just has a knack for making like super beautiful, vibrant colors that I feel like you don't see anywhere else. Gotta give them that. Plus the names are cute. Pumpkin Pie, Crushed Curry, Rich Razzleberry. Come on now. Moving on from Rich Razzleberry, we're going to Melon Mambo. And I'm just going to switch to a bigger brush here for a minute, because I did do my pink section a little large. Because Melon Mambo is just so pretty. How could you not? Look at that. You'll never find a more perfect hot pink, I swear by it. Make sure bringing that up into the Rich Razzleberry. And then we're moving down into our oranges now. Starting with, once I can close this ink pad, Calypso Coral. And this one, I feel like it didn't matter how light I did the brush, it went on kind of dark, so just prepare for that. Well, that did go a little better that time, I feel like. Oh, and there's the dark. Next, Pale Papaya. I'm still so happy that they came out with this color this year because the world really needed more orange. The end colors this year were honestly just straight on point. That polished pink though, am I right? Again, make sure that we're bringing our Pale Papaya up into our Calypso Coral. I feel like those two colors like blended really pretty with each other too. By this point, your arms should be getting tired. If they are, you're doing it right. Brushes. We're starting like a total new color family now. Okay, so this is the Mango Melody. When I did my initial card earlier, a tip, if you're worried about your spacing of your colors, I started with my Misty Moonlight and then did my Pacific Point, and then I did a couple colors on the bottom and made it so I kind of met in the middle, so I had an idea of how much space I had between my colors. Probably should have led with that. It's okay. The spacing, honestly, probably, like, you could do it however you wanted. You could even switch the colors up. You think the background would look really pretty and just like blues and purples. I just have a thing for bright summery colors, and pink and orange and yellow are those colors. So I'm just like eating summer up while we still have it because I know fall's coming. And fall is like definitely my favorite season. But it comes with wind, and fall is nice, but then snow happens. And snow is not nice. Okay. So next we're going to go in with our sponge daubers. And my goal here was to add pigment, but also to kind of make these transition lines a little more seamless, because you don't want hard lines. I don't want to be able to see where one color stops and another starts. The idea is that they're blended together, right? I'm coming through, just adding a little more pigment here, putting a lot of focus into right here where this Mango Melody ended. Making sure that I'm daubing up into that. Be careful too, because I did notice earlier I was able to hide it well, but if you have ink from up here on your fingers when you're doing this and you're touching, your ink's gonna... Careful not to get like your Pacific Point down here on your Daffodil Delight, because it's noticeable. Just be mindful. Okay, so now we're essentially working our colors backwards. So we just daubed our Daffodil Delight, so now we're going to go back onto the Mango Melody. Again, just kind of coming in here, adding a little more pigment. That one goes on flawlessly anyways, I feel like. So I just want to make sure we're blending it well into that Pale Papaya. I kind of work my dauber too, like up and down. I don't go in a straight line. Then I feel like the blend looks less intentional and more free. Is free a good word? I think free is a good word. Next is Pale Papaya. The Pale Papaya, well, it's just that, it's pale. So it's hard to get it really pigmented on the card to begin with. So my goal with that, if you look, you can clearly see where my line of Pale Papaya is, and it's the thinnest one. I just kind of went back with the dauber afterwards and really brought my Pale Papaya up and down into the Mango Melody and the Calypso Coral, opposed to just having a section of Pale Papaya, because I felt like it looked better than just having a really light color there all of a sudden, and then it was really small and barely noticeable. And Pale Papaya is a great color standalone, just not, it didn't work out as well as I'd wanted it to for this card for what I'd initially planned, but this is how I made it work, and I love it. So we're going with it and sticking with it. So then we're going back to our Calypso Coral. I'll make sure I have the right dauber. And again, the Calypso Coral lays down really great. So my goal was just to kind of come back down into this Pale Papaya, and then to make sure that we brought it up into the Mango Melody. Which gives you a nice, like, kind of darker pink, which I thought was really pretty. So if you look from here down, I feel like this blending looks a lot more blended versus where we started up here. So that's why we're going back through with the daubers. So we're going to take our Mango Melody. Then our rich raspberries. Make sure I grab the right dauber. I love, like, the earthy, plummy looking purples. And so I think the rich raspberry and the blackberry bliss are just the world's most perfect colors. I'm really excited to use them in my fall cards, which is what I'm working on after this one. So hopefully we'll have more tutorials and videos for you guys. I just want, because that was such a drastic color change, I do want to hit my Mango Melody just one more time with that. Make sure we really are working those colors into each other, opposed to just daubing like I'm actually rubbing here. Okay. Next we do the gorgeous Grape, and I really don't feel like I put enough of that down with the blending brush. So I want to make sure that we really take the time here and work that into that Night of Navy and bring it up into the card. Wonder if space is actually this pretty and colorful when you go. You think like nebulas and solar flares and galaxies and all that color, but I feel like when you see pictures from the actual space station, it's always just black. I love space. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel like living there would be better than being here on Earth. I'll just break into NASA and yeet ourselves into the void. I've been to NASA, the NASA Space Center in Houston. It was pretty rocking. I got to see the Saturn V rocket. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it's the one that was used for the Apollo moon landings. Landing, I guess, but the space race, you know, the moon and all of that. It's like this huge rocket, and they keep it in like this warehouse. And it's like prepared to go and functional if they were to ever need it again. So the rocket's essentially retired, but like ready to get called to work. But it's like really amazing to think of like where the rocket's been and what it's done, and then to get to go stand next to it and take pictures. So if you haven't been to Space Center Houston, add it to your bucket list. It's my fave. I'm actually going to Houston to visit my grandma here in a week and 2 days, and I'm really thinking about pitching to her taking me to NASA. I'll pay for it and everything. I just want to go see the rocket. It'll be fine. She lives there, so it's probably not as cool for her because, oh, it's Houston. I don't know though. I got a picture of her walking into the Mission Control Center, and it was a big old smile on her face. It's my favorite ever picture of her. She hates it, but it's definitely framed. And in my scrapbook. More than once. I make no apologies. Okay, so we're just finishing up this last bit here. This Misty Moonlight. Look at that. It's so pretty already. You could just send it as an ombre card and call it good, honestly. We're not going to, but you could. If you're starting to feel lazy at this point. It's okay. So, we are done with these ink pads now. So I'm just going to shift them out of the way. Take a sip of my coffee quick. So, our next task is to do the splatters for the stars. See all the pretty little splatters? So to do that, last time I did it, I just used white paint. And I thought, how can I do this with Stampin' Up products? And I feel like I got really creative. So we're going to take... a toothbrush. This was a whole toothbrush earlier, but I broke it. But we're going to take a toothbrush and either a palette, a paper plate. We could do it on my Tim Holtz mixed media mat, but it's to mix things on, but I really don't like getting it messy. So we're going to take that, and then we're going to take our white, our Whisper White ink refill, and then a Blackberry Bliss ink refill. So we're going to take, the white is kind of, I feel like they're both thick, but I feel like the white's really thick. I don't know if mine's just off maybe. But I really wanted my white to be white white. I didn't want it to be, what am I, like translucent, I guess would be the word I'm thinking. So I kind of went a little heavy on my white. And then on my Blackberry Bliss, I just kind of went for 2 drops. Oh, we almost got 3 there. And then I took a spritzer and just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 3 pumps in each. And then starting with the white, because I felt like if I did the Blackberry Bliss first, I was more likely to mix that with the white and then it would not look white. So I did the white first because that to me made sense. And you just want to get it on your toothbrush bristles. This is a soft bristled toothbrush. I don't know if that would make a difference or not. And then leave this on your scratch paper because this gets messy. And you're just going to literally rub your thumb across the bristles, but over the paper. And look at that beautiful splatter. Look at the stars. Okay, and then I had to rinse my pad after I did this earlier, but I just rubbed the white out onto my Stampin' scrub. And then I went in for the Blackberry Bliss. Again, mix it up. And then the Blackberry Bliss, I tried to focus more down here towards where we have the yellows and the lighter colors. I went up with it too, but you're gonna see it more down where it's lighter. So to me, it made more sense to put it there. And then if you're not happy with it and you think it needs more, I feel like I want a little more white on mine. So I'm gonna go back in, add a little more white. And there we go. So that is the background of our card. I'm going to, without trying to get the ink from my hands all over it, set it to the side. And at this point earlier, this is where I pulled out my stamp set and I started, hang on, Jeannie, can you bring me a napkin, please? This is earlier at this point. For while it dried, I took the time and I did my stamps and I colored everything and I cut everything out. So I have pre-stamped my stuff and pre-colored it because that did take some time. But I'm gonna sit here and cut it out and explain a couple of things. So I did a girl on this card, but I thought, you know, I might need a card for a birthday boy. So on this one, we did a boy. I did a mixture of stamping blends, Stampin' Right markers. I think for the faces, I used just a colored pencil. And then I did use gel pens for this little bits of silver and gold here. So I stamped one stamp of the rocket, one stamp of one of the astronauts, one stamp of the puppy dog astronaut, because how could you not? A set of the planets, and then I made a moon and another planet. And to do this, super easy, take one of the refills that we just used and a black Stampin' Right marker. For the larger one, I just put it down and traced it. And then for the smaller one, I took the cap off, put the cap down, and trace the cap. And you'll get a kind of a jagged line. It's not gonna be perfect, but then I just went back over with my Stampin' Right marker and kind of clean the line up a little bit. We're gonna cut it out anyways, so I mean, no one's gonna know. But that's how I got those two sizes. And then I just colored them. My moon is done. The background is Sahara sand. The craters are basic gray, and then I outlined my craters in basic black. So that one was pretty much just gray. So it's simple. And I just kind of splotched my craters on, however. I didn't look at a diagram of the moon or anything. They're different on both cards. For this guy, this planet, I really like, I was trying to make sure that I incorporated lots of different colors. So for this one, I used the light Highland Heather blend over the whole circle. And then I took the rich Razzleberry Stampin' Right marker, the brush tip, and I did stripes. I just kind of rounded them to match the shape of the planet. So I didn't do just straight lines there. Kind of coved. Just like that. Then I did the trio of planets, but I felt like the other two were a little small for what I needed. But I really liked the one with the ring because Saturn and Neptune and Uranus and Jupiter all have rings. I don't think maybe Neptune does. Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter all do for sure. A lot of people don't know that Jupiter has rings. Jupiter is definitely the coolest planet. Everyone thinks it's Saturn because it's got rings. It's so cool. Or Mars because, you know, you can do life on Mars. But it's definitely Jupiter. This one, I used Daffodil Delight in the light blend. And then the Pumpkin Pie Dark blend, I kind of went around and just shadowed almost where that ring is. And then I went over both of those with the light Daffodil Delight again, and then Mango Melody for the ring. Then we got our little puppy dog. I wonder if he's ever going to get that bone. It's like outside of his little spacesuit. So for the dog, I just did his spots. On this one, I believe I did them in crumb cake. But on this card, I did them in cinnamon cider. So, however you want to spot him up. We should name him Spot. Okay. Then for his collar, just pick a color. It doesn't matter. I did Cherry Cobbler on this one. But on my little girl card, I believe I used the Polished Pink. It's personal preference. And we're just gonna fussy cut all of these out. Should we get his tail? All right, and there's Spot. Then for the little boy, I used the Misty Moonlight light and dark blends. His boots are done in the gray granite, I believe. Stampin' Right marker. The rubber bottoms of his boots are black. His gloves were also done in the gray granite. His belt and these little notches on his spacesuit were done with the light Granny Apple Green blend. His hair I did in cinnamon cider. His tongue is the dark Mango Melody blend. And then I used a colored pencil for his skin tone because I initially tried it in the light pumpkin pie blend and he definitely looked like an Oompa Loompa. And that's not what I was going for. Though Oompa Loompas making candy in space would definitely be a good movie. And then I just used a random gel pen for his star patch and a couple of accents on him for that silver and that gold. You can just use whatever you have at home to color them. It doesn't matter. And then lastly, we have our rocket. For the rocket, I used both the light and dark Misty Moonlight blends, the light and dark Just Jade blends, the light and dark Granny Apple Green blends, the dark Pumpkin Pie, and the light Mango Melody for the flames. So, and again, you could color that however you wanted. If you're making the card for somebody specific and you know their favorite colors, you could work that into your card. this point too earlier while my card base was drying. Now that we have all of our stamped items cut out, I stamped my sentiment. So I used the Whisper White ink and the Celebrating You as a Blast, and then white embossing powder to bring out that white because it's a muted white. But the white does double as embossing ink. And so I applied my heat gun to that and got my sentiment. And so now we have everything we need to attach to our card, ready to go outside of our celestial body. We can't forget that guy. Okay, so we take our crushed curry layered circle. Earlier, what I did was I took the whole circle and just positioned it how I thought that I would want it on my card. And then I inked it, but I just have this half circle already, so we're just gonna use that. To give that a little dimension and texture and character, I took a, oh, if I could find it. There it is. A sponge dauber and cinnamon cider ink, and kind of inked at the bottom of it. So we're just gonna do that quick. You can do as much or as little as you want. You could change the color of this even. It doesn't have to be yellow. I did it in the crushed curry because I felt like it worked into the gradient of color we had on the card already. So it's just me. Come up here and kind of stamp off this little bit of excess, just so it's not just this hard line. And then again with the blending on this card, we are going to take the Daffodil Delight ink pad and I did this one up at the top and brought it down, and it doesn't add a whole bunch, but I think it added just enough that you got some more color variation in there and something to blend in with that cinnamon cider. Move our scrap paper. We're done with that now. Grab our card base, touch, make sure it's dry. It's mostly dry. I'm gonna go for it. So now's the fun part. We're gonna finish up the card. So we're gonna take our celestial body and add glue and put that on our card. On mine, it was off-centered because I had accidentally got Pacific Point on my Daffodil Delight, as I mentioned earlier. That was not friendly to cover up. So I wanted it kind of off-centered, but not as off-centered as it was in the other card. But you can always hide a mistake with an embellishment in paper crafting. So if you have a whole circle, get the position however you would want it, and then once it's dry enough, trim it off. I'm actually going to bring mine down a little bit so I've got something to trim too. The easiest way to trim is just to open your card and trim anything that hangs off of that white. Then you're not guessing and you're not cutting anywhere where you're not intending to. Next, we're going to need some Stampin' Dimensionals. We're going to take, I raised my rocket and my astronaut, but everything else was glued down flat. So I want him to look like he's jumping on this body in space. So pop some dimensionals on him. If you have your dimensionals are too big for, say, his hands or his feet, and you really want to make sure those are lifted and they're not going to get damaged, trim up your excess on your sides, like your half honeycombs, and then use those in those smaller tight spaces. And then you don't waste anything, and you can lift him as much as you want. Okay. Peel our backing off of those without peeling the foam off of the card. Would be ideal here, Leslie. And he's jumping here on this body, and he's having so much fun. Okay. Next, I'm going to glue my sentiment down just so I have an idea of where I want it and to work around, because I don't want to get all of my pieces on the card and then not have room for the sentiment. So I offset, not like offset, but I have it so the C is just at the end of the card, so I'm going to have this excess to cut off. So I didn't want that whole big piece on the card. I just wanted enough of the sentiment. Trim that. Make sure it's straight if that's how you want it. I think then we're gonna take, I kind of laid this out to decide how I wanted it before I glued everything down. And I think that that looks good. So we're gonna take and lift our rocket up like we talked about. Pop him up with a couple of our dimensionals. And then the rest we're going to use our multi-purpose liquid glue and just mount our planets and our moons and Spot. We can't forget Spot. What little boy wouldn't want to bring his doggy to space? This little guy with the ring I feel like looked the best on the blue because that's where it popped the most, and it was such a pretty planet. When I glued Spot, I made sure that I put a little dollop of glue on his bone. He's just floating there. And then for the final touch on the card, I wanted a way to add something that seemed star-like to me. So we used the shimmery crystal effects. And I just went through and randomly placed dots for stars. Doesn't matter how many you do, how little you do. The other idea for stars that I had was to stamp the star stamp and then maybe do a glittery embossing powder. But I just bought the shimmery crystal effects and I hadn't used it yet, so I figured we'd try it out. And I really liked how it came out, so. This looks kind of milky right now, but when it dries, it'll dry clear just with that shimmer. And now we have a little starry background and a completed card. You just have to stamp your sentiment on the inside. You could put a little strip of DSP or something to decorate it if you want. You can maybe even do some blending on the inside. However you do that is up to you. And there is our finished blended space cards. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know. I will post it with items and item numbers in the description. Feel free to share, like, comment. If you want to buy the stamp set and make these cards now, make them, share your pictures in the comments, and make sure you select me as your demonstrator. Bye, guys!